Hey there everyone! Before we get started, I'd like to thank AquelGamerMexicano for suggesting this topic. If you have a topic you'd like to recommend, feel free to let me know either on Twitter at SilverGreg78 or in the comments section of this or any other of my videos. A short while back I discussed the issue of minor and major glitches in newer games and whether or not they should be considered in reviews, since many glitches get patch fixed soon after release or over the course of the few weeks after. Most people seem to agree that those glitches should be considered when generating opinions and scores, but that raises another interesting question. Should reviewers of these games in question be doing post-patch reviews? It's true that errors can destroy the gameplay experience, resulting in lower scores, so it's also true that when those errors are fixed, the gameplay experience can be different to varying degrees. Before we can form a solid opinion on this though, we need to ask two questions. What kinds of errors were there, and what was fixed? Let's say you find a random corner in a random room of a game, and through specific movements cause your character to glitch through a wall. A patch may be released to fix things like this that were discovered after a game's release, but those are very specific errors that could easily have been missed in coding and testing, and even in multiple playthroughs. Then you have, as in the case of Mass Effect Andromeda, things like quote-unquote ugly character models, which is to say, things that aren't necessarily broken, but are poorly accepted by players, resulting in patches to change them. These things function as they were intended, but may take away from the game's presentation. Technically, they're opinion-based, but widespread negative opinions should always be addressed. Then you have the game breakers. Saving errors, glitches that may halt progression, missing animations or text, levels or areas that are completely unplayable for various reasons. Basically anything that creates a catastrophic problem that must be fixed. I think most patches will fall into these three categories, as anything that only adds to a game without removing something is more likely to be considered an update. For the random errors, I think it's perfectly fine to avoid covering those in future reviews. Not only are they fixed, but even if they weren't, they shouldn't detract much from the overall game experience. In fact, many players like seeing things like that. Not only can they be hilarious, but in many cases can be used for tricks during things like speedruns or getting through difficult areas. Again, these kinds of glitches should be easily avoidable, so finding them is up to the player. The next two, however, aren't so easy to miss. The second category of glitches is when we start to enter a bit of a gray area. Many issues in this grouping fall under the umbrella of opinions. Character models, game difficulty, mechanics, and other such aspects are things that can warrant future reviews based on how negatively they were received, assuming one major factor is included, and that's a comparison. If a second review is made, attention should be given to the original version of the game, including side-by-sides of the visuals, explaining which of the mechanics were altered, and most importantly, why these changes were made. Personally, for score-based reviewers, I'd ask that the original score be shown along with the new score. This will help to highlight the importance of the changes made, as well as give some idea as to how much of the game is different because of them. The old scores will also matter in the future for a reason I'll get into later. Moving on to the most important patches, I feel like I have the strongest opinion on these, and I do so for one major reason. To repeat, these are the glitches that, without patches, greatly affect your ability to play the game overall. Once again, any reviews that are revisited after these fixes should include clarification that it's a post-patch review, and should detail what was fixed. However, and this may be a bit harsh, I think that a game that gets shipped with game-breaking glitches doesn't deserve a new review. Revisiting a game and mostly ignoring previous problems like these sends a bad message to companies, and that is that releasing games in this condition is fine. Quality needs to be upheld, and for reviewers, the easiest way to hold companies accountable for poor quality is in the scores and opinions, and if they're going to just keep changing them, why should anyone care about them in the first place? Most importantly though, there's a major reason scoring based on release versions of games should be maintained. I mentioned before that for the second category, the old scores will matter down the road, and the reason is much more significant for the third category. What happens when these games reach the secondary market and the patches that fix the problems don't exist anymore? As a retro gamer, this is a major issue that can't be ignored. It's one thing if, 15 years down the road, new Mass Effect Andromeda players are stuck with the original character designs. But what happens when an error that erases a game's save data can't be fixed anymore? Players will be stuck with a game they can't play, but were caught off guard because secondary reviews forgot to mention that was an issue when the game was released. Fortunately, re-releases of games such as Game of the Year editions usually fix the biggest problems, but when these kinds of glitches are found in mid-tier games that may never see remasterings or any kind of revisit, the glitches may become permanent. I doubt this will become a widespread problem, but it is a problem nonetheless, and is another reason that heavily glitched games shouldn't be allowed in the market in the first place. Glitches have always been a part of the video game landscape. From clipping through walls and floors to going completely out of bounds, there are usually ways to exploit program errors or inconsistencies. But from the beginning, these usually happened by choice and didn't affect our ability to play the game normally. Today, we need to worry about major errors that get sold to us with the assumption that they can be fixed later. Reviewers should do their best to give us an overview of the gaming experience we wish to spend our money on. But should they have to keep updating their reviews based on companies fixing problems that shouldn't have been there in the first place? What about changes made due to player preference and opinions? In a way, wouldn't that undermine the entire concept of reviewing games? Personally, I think the decision to re-review games should be left to the reviewer, but no matter what, I think initial reviews should be left intact and considered, because those day one scores we see are as important as those day one games that we pay for. I'd like to thank you all for listening to my thoughts on this topic. Let me know what you think about the idea of re-reviewing games and changing scores based on various kinds of post-release patches. Do you think it's justified, or should reviewers stick to their initial assessments and be done? And again, if you have any topics you'd like me to discuss, feel free to share them either here or on Twitter at SilverGreg78. Thank you all very much for listening, and have a great day.